You know that getting on these webinars is kind of a three-step process. Most of you are on here by now, obviously know that. We have a lot of newer people, so I want to just let everybody know that it is getting your enrollment on the website or via one of our event newsletters. But then you have to always remember to look for that registration link in the confirmation email after your enrollment. And that's the key part, because what happens there is it turns it over to the GoToWebinar service that communicates directly to you and will immediately return you a unique link, a personal link unique to you, to join any and all of our live webinars like this. And also it sets you up to get on the follow-up email list where we will send the PDF, a link to the PDF with all the audio links, an MP3 file, a download link, and the video recording that we cleaned up right here with this process afterwards, usually 24 to 48 hours. So there you go. There's your webinar process in a nutshell. And with that, I'll apologize for any delay and turn it over to Kim.
All right, everyone, welcome. Here we go again. I hope all of you had wonderful holidays, holy days, and that you're ready for 2018, because there's a lot of activity that's going on. I have 66 PowerPoint slides to get through, so apologies if I talk fast sometimes. Hopefully I will be able to get through all of this material for you. I did not want to leave anything out, and thank you ahead of time for allowing us to go a little bit over time-wise on this webinar with all the exciting material you have coming up here. And so here at EAN, you can study with us 3 different ways. You can listen to our free weekly audio podcasts, you can subscribe to our Astro Library, and you can roll in our Evolutionary Astrology course. And we've extended our coupon on the course materials. You can apply the coupon code Capricorn at checkout and save 25% through January 18th. This is good for the materials only, as you see right here on your screen, binders and DVDs. It's good for both material and digital. The digital only does not go on sale because it's already at a value cost. However, the other 2, if you're interested in joining us, come on board. And if you're already with us on segment 1, we have segment 2 and 3 on sale as well. Here's our ingress chart for January 1st, 2018. I always use 0-degree Aries houses so that wherever you are in the world, we're all looking at a generic chart that we can apply equally. The biggest thing is this this Mars-Jupiter conjunction that is coming up in a few days, early 2018, that is square the nodes of the moon. In evolutionary astrology, this is skip steps. This is going to be skip steps with action and with integration around resources and sexuality issues and power versus powerless, power over, power under. So Mars, Jupiter are going to carry a theme all the way through the year because it's probably one of the 2 most dynamic ones. The other one is the stellium up here in Capricorn. Venus is on the far side of the sun, getting ready to do its exterior conjunction to the sun in Capricorn here. That good old Capricorn theme that we've had is going to intensify the more we go through 2018, 19, and 2020. We have a couple of squares, and they are offset by some trines, including Mercury filling in for this grand trine we've had most of the year 2017 with the North Node and Uranus. Mercury brings it in with communications. Will the truth be exposed, or will we continue to find ourselves lied to or manipulated to or sold a sales job? That theme could continue through 2018. And if anything's not exposed, Jupiter in Sag 2019 will bring it out. Well, more on this as it comes along. I wanted to bring in this side from last year because think back a year ago, how many of you, probably most of our listeners, may have been a little shell-shocked at the way the election went out. And this was my favorite quote. I call 2017 the year of activism. 2018 is going to be the year of grounding. But Jonathan Shell, violence is the method by which the ruthless few can subdue the passive many. Nonviolence is a means by which the active many can overcome the ruthless few. I think that this will be a theme throughout this entire 9-year cycle in numerology. 2017 being a 1 year, 2018 becomes a 2-year on a general level in numerology. And so from the broadest perspectives, any seed thoughts that were laid last year must be germinated, nurtured, and supported throughout 2018. Remember that word resistance? That word is going to be carried forth into this year, into what are you resisting? What are you wanting to build through your resistance? This will happen both inclusively and exclusively. And of course, in numerology, we're going to build up to 2021, which would be the apex 5-year of any current 9-year cycle. So think about this. What are you going to build over the next 3 years, 4 years, as we are moving forward with this new 9-year numerological cycle that's still in its early infancy? 2 years in numerology are survival years. Energy turns towards persistence and endurance to manifest again the new beginnings that we started. However, if there's been a new beginning that isn't survivable, we can see breakdown, decay, and a dying off. Think about this in the terms of who we elected to presidency in the United States. Last year at this time, I was quite fond of saying I don't see him lasting 4 years. I don't like the word prediction. I don't know what will happen, but I do not think he has a survivable presidency. Speaking of Donald Trump here, stay tuned. We'll see. Adaptability is also needed in a 2-year in order to survive and flourish. If you think about this similar to astrology, Aries first sign, Taurus second sign, we've got to adapt in order to survive on planet Earth. And that's one of the things we've done as a species. Many species, most species on planet Earth have evolved into 2 genders because that allows for an immune system to evolve faster, and it increases the percentage of our ability to survive. I also think with it being a 2-year, separate from Uranus and Taurus, that we can see Earth events continue to happen, maybe even increase with a 2-year in numerology and Uranus in Taurus. I'll speak about some of these trends that I'm going to go over in the next couple of slides in more detail, but one of the things that's happening in 2018 is astrologically, energy is going to be shifting from the fire element to the earth element. And this is Uranus shifting from Aries to Taurus, and Saturn shifting from Sagittarius to Capricorn. So they're both now going to join Pluto in an earth element. And the earth elements, and also adding in both Taurus and Capricorn, it causes life to turn more serious, practical. Earth element, we're consumed with the physical world. Now, how this shift comes along is the fact that the active polarity, which is the fire elements, energy moving out from the center. The earth elements are all passive polarity, which means energy returning into the center. I've got to consolidate all that burst forth from fire. Earth following as an element, I've got to conserve it. I have got to figure out how to stabilize its manifestation. I think that one of the most major themes this year is going to be resources and money. They're going to be related to our survival issues And as you shall see here, this changing job market. One of the things that's really happening from Uranus, Pluto, and Uranus, Neptune is what they're now calling the nanoization of labor, nano labor. Nano means small, small, small particles. Here's some of the words that it's being called by. On-demand economy, gig economy, sharing economy, flexible economy. And so instead of the traditional 8 to 5 world, 40 hours a week, you work the job for 30 years, you get your gold watch. Now you're all on your own. You might be working 3 jobs. You are renting your home out with Airbnb or your couch. You may be driving an Uber vehicle, and you might be working a couple of other part-time jobs or making something out of your home that you sell off of, what's it called? Etsy, I think it is, a website that sells homemade goods. You get the point here. Those themes are not going to slow down. And for the majority of people, the middle class, the working class, it's not always going to be enough to survive. One of the themes of Pluto and Capricorn is doing more for less. Well, how far can we be squeezed? So Jupiter in Scorpio, Uranus moving into Taurus, resources covers a wide, broad area of our physical world and whatever you need for survival and flourishing. Jupiter in Scorpio is going to continue that sharing resources or not debate. It's also going to include sexuality and the power over under themes. Things will continue to be exposed. Stay tuned to see if it really is something that's going to change and evolve. It will be up to all of us as a collective to see what happens. Mars and Venus have retrograde cycles this year. Mars, Aquarius, Capricorn, Venus, Scorpio, Libra. So they cover relationships, sexuality, and resources. And the signs they are in the second half of the year cover those archetypes as well. Stay tuned. Chiron changes signs. Here is the fire element. Chiron initiates a brand new 51-year self-healing cycle, individually, collectively, but it may also help us become aware how there are certain groups of people by gender or race or geography that are not evolving, that are not receiving help, that are not receiving the helping hand up. For instance, the U.S. citizens of Puerto Rico, where 50% of the people still do not have electricity. Could you live half of a year without electricity? Here's the biggie for 2018, Uranus in Taurus. Uranus is 84 years around the zodiac, 7 years in the sign. It's going to move into Taurus and be there through 2025, 26. As you can see on your screen, here it is, dipping in May through November, goes back into Aries, November through May, and then here it is for that 7 years that it's going to be in Taurus before it eventually moves on into Gemini. Uranus and Taurus, here's the themes. It pertains to the physical and biological survival of our species, which includes sexuality. You will see all kinds of medical trends coming out that allow us to heal cancers differently, better than we ever have before. We could very easily, before Uranus gets out of Taurus, find ourselves with a little chip in our skin that monitors insulin or monitors anything that you've got to watch in the physical body as it survives and adapts to its environment and its food and its exercise. Value systems, Taurus word. What do we value inside ourselves? What do we value outside of ourselves? What kind of a house do you need? What kind of clothing? What do you value on a collective level as you align with whatever your perceived group is, Uranus? It will be our relationship with both ourselves and others, including the environment. There's going to be a lot of upheaval in how we perceive relationships individually and collectively. As you know, Uranus shakes anything up that needs to be deconditioned and liberated into new forms. Security issues will really come up through Uranus and Taurus, especially in regards to resources. But what happens when an archetype of a planet goes through the sign of Taurus is we get very invested in feeling secure, fixed earth, don't shake me up. And it can cause inertia, laziness, possessiveness. Good luck with those, Uranus and Taurus. You might get by with it for a little while, but not very long. It'll create that polarity, Scorpio, confrontation, and plutonium, uranium upsets in your world. Pray for peace, everybody. Um, yeah, Uranus in Taurus, Uranus ruling uranium, polarity Scorpio ruling plutonium. This is where we do want some laziness to show up, huh? It's also going to have a lot to do with our relationships with resources, money, again, that physical world. But all of this is going to be shook up. There can be a lot that can come through for the positive in all these areas. There can be some upsets we may not want to see. For instance, climate change, earth events can happen so that we are kind of forced to recognize our species as humans in relationship to planet Earth. There is no more dominion over Scorpio polarity. It is recognizing the equality of all species relating to planet Earth. And I'll try not to belabor this too much. I really feel that there's going to be financial upsets to evolve our monetary systems. I have had 10 years since Pluto went into Capricorn of really studying monetary systems. I don't have fear around this anymore. I have a lot of hope. Not to say that there won't be a few upsets happening for people. Stay tuned, more details on this. Here is probably, there's going to be two key time periods in 2018 that are just a congestion of things going on in the sky. Probably the biggest one is the day of the midterm elections. The polls open at 7 a.m. in Washington, D.C., so I actually set the chart for then. Sun is rising. All of our U.S. elections on a federal level happen during Sun in Scorpio, which creates all those upheavals of power going back and forth between the four-year presidential elections and then the midterm elections that follow that. But what is most interesting is Uranus will be exactly square the nodes on that day. Venus will have squared the nodes a couple of days before. It is still in orb with an opposition to Uranus. It's going to be pulling in the moon, which will square the nodes on election day as well. Oh, and also on November 6, 2018, the nodes of the moon are going to reverse into Cancer, Capricorn. Talk about power upsets. If any of you are of the resistance mode, as it's being called here in the US, and would like to see things swing to a more inclusive perspective, I don't think there's been a better year to organize. This chart alone should motivate you to be active on a grassroots level in whatever direction you want to see things swing. They're talking about it. Take nothing as an assumption or a guarantee. Hillary Clinton learned that lesson in 2016. So did the National Democratic Party. But as for progressive grassroots uprisings, here's the chart. We'll be coming off of a nodal return for the United States as well. So there's a whole rebirthing of emotional shifts on a collective level that we'll see taking place over the summer and culminating into Election Day 2018. Now, how many of you are aware of these aspects? Uranus biseptile Pluto. We all remember those Uranus waxing squares, 7 of them, 2012, 2015. Oh, those new beginnings, everything is going to break free. Uranus and Aries, we're going to do so good. And then Pluto and Capricorn said, not so fast. Well, here's your second chance coming up. And of course, Pluto in Capricorn is going to attempt to continue to maintain control as it goes through the third decant or the last 10 degrees of Capricorn. And Uranus in Taurus is going to break down anything that is unsurvivable. And history has shown time and time and time again, when we have extremes of wealth disparity, sooner or later something upsets the apple cart to redistribute in more equitable terms. We can choose to be doing it proactively in a more sharing on a natural way, or we can have it appear to happen to us because we're doing the money grabs and I don't ever have enough money, more. These are going to be some important aspects because I'm going to show you this visually first. Evolutionary astrology always works with the 360-degree cycle of aspects and phases, the 8 phases as you can see on your screen here. You always start with the slower moving planet. You make it the 0 degrees point and you move the faster moving planet counterclockwise until you reach the degrees around the zodiac it has moved away from 0. So here's Uranus at the biseptile aspect within the first quarter crises in action phase. Here were those first quarter squares. We're trying to head to these trines, all right? Well, we all remember we initiated, but first quarter and cardinal signs, Aries, Capricorn, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. As Uranus now moves into Taurus and reaches into this biseptile, this is beautiful opportunities to really ground sustainable new beginnings. Just as a reminder here, biseptals are the harmonics of 7. Go back here and I'll show you this quickly. Here's 1, the 0. Septile, 2, bi, 3, tri, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's dividing the circle by 7. So that's what septiles are, the harmonics of 7. All 3 of those, septile, biseptile, triseptile, they bring in a sense of special destiny that allows us to align with whatever our necessary path of evolution may be. And at the biseptile, whatever the new forms or purpose are, they're going to be of a highly individualized nature. First quarter phase, okay, crises in action, we've got to manifest. You can reflect on this in your own chart as an individual level, but you can also look at this individualized nature country by country. And you can even broaden it out to look at this as planet Earth. If you look at the collective amongst us who use Western tropical astrology, there are many of us vibrating to this biseptile aspect between Uranus and Pluto. So what needs to happen? We need to manifest these new forms, and we have to create realities that reflect these new forms. We can reflect back to the septile, the 51-degree mark. I didn't look that one up with Uranus, Pluto. I have to make a note here with my Pluto Virgo, excuse me. I wanted to see what years those were. I'll see if I can put that into the PowerPoint slide for when you want to refer back to that. What can happen though here? Remember, alignment with necessary path of evolution. All septiles can appear to be those fated aspects, those fated moments where necessary circumstances come along that point the way to the new form. Think about this from the perspective of the US, the shock of Hillary Clinton losing the election, the shock of what happened with Trump, all the stuff that they have tried to initiate. Talk about the court systems being even more active than they were in the Obama years, or stay tuned, talk about the things that we may change on local, state, and federal levels with different candidates, even with changing amendments to our US Constitution. More on that. But you get this point, okay? This is a time period with these Uranus-Pluto aspects, 2018 to 2021, that we can realign how we are moving things forward. Now, the consensus consciousness, approximately 7 out of 10, which is always very Saturnian, they're afraid of these changing societies that happen from the Uranus-Pluto first quarter squares. They want to cling to that past and tradition of Pluto and Capricorn. And what did we see happen time and time and time again? What I feel is really economic issues and economic unrest. It was exploited as racial issues. There's not enough to go around. I should almost have said immigrant issues as well, in regards to this, in addition to racial. You know, somebody else is taking my job, rather than addressing what's really happening between the haves and have-nots. Saturn's going to move into Capricorn. It may emphasize this old stuff even more, but it will continue to break down this old stuff to move forward as it moves through and initiates a brand new 30-year cycle in its own sign. And so can the consensus recognize the real issue is between the haves and have-nots? We will see technology continue to evolve these jobs and careers. So at this biseptile, Uranus is at the end of what it's going to initiate with Pluto. Go back to those conjunctions in the middle 60s and the, the birth of the environmental movement, the, birth of so many things breaking free from that Pluto and Cancer generation of what Jeffrey Green would call the Betty Crocker Marlborough roles that we had with genders. Here again, these biseptile aspects are going to bring the potential to realign with how we need to evolve forward, but it's not guaranteed. The degree of realignment is going to depend upon how involved you choose to be. That pendulum can still swing back conservative, might do that in some countries, for instance, Iran. What's really going on there is the nuclear deal was pushed in their country as bringing about prosperity and more jobs for the people. And the masses elected a more liberal president who turned conservative after getting elected in 2013. So they currently 12% inflation, 40% youth unemployment. This biseptile may evolve their country, it may not. I think it's definitely going to evolve us in regards to climate change. I think this one is going to be a guarantee. Nature and natural events with Uranus and Taurus is going to force the green energy changes that are upon us as a collective on planet Earth. Here's the polarity points, just briefly. That Uranus polarity point Scorpio. Have you ever heard of debt jubilees? They came from the Old Testament, where in ancient Jewish cultures, every 7 years, don't ask me where that number came from. Astrologers might, relate it to Saturn, but every 7 years, all debts would be erased so that everyone had a chance to get out of debt and start over again. There have been different jubilees around the world in various ways that happen. Stay tuned. We'll see if something like that happens in Europe or happens in the US or happens in another country. But the whole purpose is when the debt becomes so unsustainable that it cannot be met, that the masses cannot feed themselves anymore, something has to shake it up and reallocate that. Here comes those Jupiter retrogrades in Scorpio. To me, the rise of public banks controlled by the census is what is needed. But it can also bring about a lot of relationship metamorphoses. Of course, distortions here with this polarity point, more sexual trauma, power grabs, inequalities, resource extremes go even more. How far do they go before we have the uprisings? Stay tuned, story will unfold. And of course, I've said for a long time that the Pluto and Capricorn polarity point Cancer is the grassroots uprisings. We've seen populism on both the left and right. We've seen the nationalism go on. We've seen the gender fairness issues come up. We've seen all kinds of gender issues that have been brought out of the closet here. And that Cancer polarity, you turn around and someone in your family is gay or trans, and you have to take a whole different look at it. But of course, we can also have more racism in some areas, more of those power grabs. We can continue, for instance, here in the US to have those emotional disturbances or ideologies that lead to more mass shootings that can come along. Things to ponder, themes to look at. Here's the other one. How many of you are aware of this aspect? Uranus makes 5 waxing semi-squares to Neptune, 2017 to 2019. This is the 45-degree semi-square that takes us from new phase to crescent phase. From energy moving outward, new phase, to energy moving inward, crescent phase. So this is where we have to struggle to ground all the new beginnings. They have a 172-year cycle. And of course, these conjunctions that they had, I'll show you next screen, they took place in Capricorn. Work is God. Uranus, Neptune conjunctions in Capricorn. However, as we look at these semi-squares that happen in both Aries and Taurus, what initiations are sustainable? There's that theme again. Think about this. You don't see these aspects in your astrological calendars, but Uranus is shaking it up with both Pluto and Neptune over the next 3 years. These are aspects to ponder. By the way, I did a free webinar on these waxing semi-squares that our YouTube channel is Evolutionary Astronet. Leroy will correct me if I'm wrong. Evolutionary Astronet. You can go to our YouTube channel, free webinar on this subject in more detail. 172-year cycle of evolving our collective beliefs. The one in the 1820s accelerated the Industrial Revolution when there were 3 conjunctions in Capricorn. Ooh, I got these backwards. These need to be turned around. Okay, my little details that just have to work through this. You have to bear with me. The conjunctions in the 1820s took place 2-3 Capricorn. The conjunctions in the 1990s took place 1820 Capricorn. Industrial Revolution, Technological Revolution. We can all see these reflecting and as they are emerging now. So again, that ability to maintain and support whatever the new trends are. The opposite of crescent phase is disseminating phase, which is society. Society is going to resist these changes because of the insecurities that the changes bring along. But what is another given here is the workforce is going to become globalized because of these two planets and their cycle together that were initiated in Capricorn. Multinational companies owe no allegiance to anything but their pocketbooks. And that nano labor is not going to support a living wage for most of our populations. So Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are very active in the background on collective levels. They're active in your chart individually as well. How are you going to choose to participate on planet Earth? Very briefly, I want to show you a couple of themes that I think will be quite strong. We're going to move from conventional to quantum computing. Conventional computing is like a calculator. Okay, it's binary. Things are stored and computed in either the number 1 or the number 0. Quantum computing is taking it to subatomic particles, and they will be able to store multiple values at the same time. In other words, 1, 0, both of them, or anything in between. And it's going to allow computers to move out of working serial, which is conventional, into parallel, which is quantum. So this means that the light can be both particle and wave at the same time. This is quantum physics. And this is where our computers are going. This is the beginnings of what we will call artificial intelligence. And as this continues to come along, okay, it is going to throw us into the Aquarian age, the human-computer interface, and it is going to throw all our belief systems in review. We're going to go through that great old science versus morality debate, Uranus, Neptune. But what's really going to happen again with that artificial intelligence and this technological revolution, robots are going to replace humans. How are we going to feed ourselves? There is going to be more and more of this in the news if you haven't caught it already. What's being called UBI, which means a universal basic income. When robots do 90% of the work, how are we going to find the resources to buy our groceries, to heat our homes? UBI trials are already taking place in various countries. They are in planning stages in California and Ontario, Canada. And of course, my love, public banking, and where interest is returned to the government, that will support the foundation for a universal basic income. Right now, in all of your industrialized countries, almost half of the cost of any infrastructure project goes to interest. We're trying to build a new civic center in my small little community for $180 million. 40% of that $180 million is interest. Where does that interest go? To the private coffers. So Uranus and Taurus here, going to accelerate that transition as these wealth disparities from Pluto and Cap crumble money structures, monetary structures. So we're going to see a lot of exposure of the truth of monetary systems. Jupiter and Scorpio, 2018. Uranus and Taurus, 2018 through 2025-26. Public central banks return interest to the government, the people, infrastructure. Private central banks loan money to the governments to be paid back with interest by the people or the taxpayers. I don't care where on planet Earth you live, I think that you should support the publicbankinginstitute.org, which was started here in the United States and is going to spread worldwide. Now, these figures are from the Public Bank Solution in 2014. Shows you how much of these countries, the BRICS countries, actually have public banking. Here's where it's privately controlled. Now, if you haven't heard this, you can also find information on this. There is one state in the United States that created its own state bank in 1919, 99 years ago. We'll hear about this one in 2019, because my hope is that this year New Jersey is going to become the second state to create a state bank, and that wave is going to come just like the cannabis legalization wave is happening in the U.S. Now, this is 2015 facts. 18% return on their investments. The Bank of North Dakota co-funded 300 new businesses. They increased lending by almost 13% in their 4 mandates: agriculture, small businesses, home mortgages, and student loans. Now, I want you to just know that 2015 is the year that the oil prices tanked and the whole oil industry in North Dakota fell apart, and they still had unbelievable profits. North Dakota has more banks per capita than any other state in the nation because they partner with the public banks. This will take off Uranus in Taurus. And all we're going to need is a half a dozen cities to get out of debt. Philadelphia, Santa Fe, Oakland, Seattle, San Francisco, they're the ones leading the way in creating their city banks. And what that means is they'll take their assets and their receipts, and everything will go and stay on Main Street instead of going to Wall Street. They'll keep the interest. They'll come up with the money to fund the infrastructure projects, to pay for the universal basic income that's going to come along over the next 10 to 20 years. May not be enough to pay for everything UBI, but it might provide some of those basics so that you can go out and be a real creative entrepreneur. Uranus in Taurus. Chiron in Aries. You can see the dates on your screen, 2018-19 to 26-27. Again, that 51-year cycle initiating on new healing levels, individually, collectively. And of course, Chiron in Aries, what is it going to start with? What's one of the biggest things we need to do in healing ourselves? Love ourselves, self-love. And as we become more filled with self-love, does that give us an ability to go out there and help others, love others? You know, Chiron's always called the wounded healer, and when you heal your chironic wounds, they turn into the gifts that you share with the world. Well, here's a new cycle on this. I think one of the other things that's going to happen with Chiron relative to that Uranus, Neptune, Pluto we just talked about, there's going to be all kinds of new healing technologies, be it traditional allopathic or be it alternative self-healing movements. We'll have new breakthroughs and we'll have gains into having wider acceptance for entrance, for instance, in that body-mind connection. Now, I only did one screen on Uranus and Taurus, Chiron and Aries, just to get to the bullet points as we talk about this whole year. I will do an 8-part series on both Chiron in Aries and Uranus in Taurus. I will do 2 webinars on the archetypes and their cycles, and then I'll look at transiting Chiron in Aries through all 12 houses, so you can see how that affects you personally. I'll also use individual chart examples. Stay tuned for the dates on that. Subscribe to our newsletter. If you want to be involved and know more about those, I'll go into much more detail as we get closer to April, Chiron in Aries, and May, Uranus in Taurus. Now, Jupiter and Saturn are going to show us the structures that no longer support the collective. While Uranus, if you haven't noticed that or remembered that, Uranus was waxing to Neptune and waxing to Pluto. The waxing half, 0 to 180 degrees, is building. While Uranus is just shaking it up, it's also working to build on broad collective levels. The second half of the circle, 180 to 360, is waning, it's releasing, it's surrendering, it's what's no longer serving a purpose and needs to die out, die off. Jupiter is waning to Saturn, and both Jupiter and Saturn are waning to all 4 of the outer planetary archetypes. So what are they doing in 2018? Saturn is balsamic phase Pluto, and it makes no aspects in 2018. That's how close it's getting to Pluto. Saturn's going to be in Capricorn for 3 years. I did a series on that. I got a coupon, which I'll show you at the last slide if you'd like to get that series at a reduction. But Saturn in Capricorn, 2018, 19, 20, having its conjunction to Pluto, as you see, early 2020. Again, crumbling of the old structures, old realities, and there will be a resisting to releasing control of resources or control of political power or control of our old realities that we may have just created in our own personal worlds. The degree of resistance and letting go is going to create the degree of the catalysm. This is going to, as Saturn is balsamic phase Pluto. Balsamic is the last 45 degrees of the circle, and it is surrendering to source. It is resolving karma. It is dealing with whatever you haven't dealt with in Capricorn realistic terms. And to the degree that you will surrender, to the degree that you will address any karma, the seed thoughts can come through before the conjunctions. So of course, this can include death and rebirth in balsamic phase, literal and figurative. You want to pay attention to the future-orientated messages that might come along in balsamic phase. How are you getting those little intuitive hits of where you need to change a reality in your world or something in your career or something in your familial structures? Act upon those messages. So when a planet is balsamic, when 2 planets are balsamic phase each other, and the closer and closer and closer they get to a conjunction, you have to have 1 foot in the old and 1 foot in the new. And isn't that what we do with Capricorn anyway? We want to cling to the old that we've built up, but it is a cardinal modality and it is an active polarity, and we're moving forward. So that's really how you address this Saturn balsamic phase to Pluto. There can be a lot of collective angst and depression, Capricorn word, as these conservative interests gamble to control as much of the political power and resources as possible. Here's a tidbit. There are 8 people on planet Earth, and they're not all just US citizens. I don't know the name of the 8. There are 8 people that have as much wealth as an entire half of the population on planet Earth. 8 people have as much wealth as 3.6 billion people. Is that extreme enough for you to create change? It will be necessary to organize the interests of the many and channel that depression into changing structures from the ground up, that Cancer grassroots polarity. Meaning, my issue is public banking, but it might need to network with those who are interested in climate change, who may need to network with those who are interested with race equality, because if you're people of color, we'll let your Superfund sites flood and we won't tell you and we won't do anything about it. The more that progressive grassroots interests coalesce together to realize all of these issues are interconnected, just as all species are interconnected, the more, again, the Uranus biseptiles to Pluto and the Uranus semi-squares to Neptune can bring about these big changes. Jupiter is active to 4 of the outer planets. It has last quarter sextiles to Pluto. Of course, we've heard this, the power and control issues, Scorpio, Capricorn, upsets around it, power resource, resource power grabs. We know what the Republicans did with the tax bill. Permanent tax cut for the wealthy, whereas for individuals, it is just temporary. And will we even see the tax cuts? Will it trickle down to you getting more in your paycheck? Economists on both sides of the aisle, inclusive versus exclusive, pretty much say that just doesn't happen. Now, there can be legal issues here because Jupiter in Scorpio is coming home to roost when it's in its own 12th house sign. When Jupiter moves into Sag next year, that's the sign of rules. It starts a brand new 12-year cycle of growth and expansion. So generically through the zodiac, every planet has 2 cycles. They have the Aries through Pisces cycle. Then they have a cycle that starts with the sign they rule and goes through all 12 archetypes. So this is one of the things that'll happen during the year with Jupiter in Scorpio. Last quarter sextiles. Last quarter is crises in consciousness. What's it all mean? What's the larger picture? That last quarter phase is more invested in the collective versus first quarter, the individual. I just used a couple of examples here. There can be, gazillion different legal examples. Think of whatever your favorite issues are. You can find something that's winding its way to the Supreme Court. For instance, in my little state of South Dakota, we have no income tax. We receive most of our state money through a sales tax. South Dakota is leading the Supreme Court challenge to say that all businesses must collect the sales tax no matter where they ship it to and report it back to the state of origin that recipient lives in. There will be some software programmers that make some money if the Supreme Court changes that, which it's been shot down many decades, but now with the way we buy things over the internet, this could come through to change. It's a crisis in consciousness. It just doesn't work the old brick and mortar way anymore. We also have a great potential for the public to understand how monetary systems work. Jupiter, education, integration, Scorpio, money, Pluto, Capricorn, who controls the money, who has the money. Jupiter makes waning trines to Neptune, deep spiritual reflections on emotional levels, Scorpio, Pisces. Jeffrey Green always said that evolution takes place through the emotional body. You can have all the spiritual wisdom and mental intellect possible, but until you live it through the flesh, the senses, the emotional, physical bodies, it isn't evolution. You don't evolve, you don't integrate it, you don't learn it. So what can happen here is recognizing that spirit and flesh are 2 sides of the same coin. And where this basically will stem from it's there for all of your major religions that kind of judge and deny the flesh. But from Christianity and Judaism's perspective, that whole Garden of Eden myth, there is a separation between spirit and flesh, and woman gets pushed down as representative of the body, flesh, senses, man representative spirit and intellect, and you see the disconnect, you see the inequality. So we're reaching the end of the Piscean age. We're starting to look at it and go, wait a minute, more and more people are going, I don't need a book to know the morality. So this would be a subtle one, these waning trines, because it's not the tension of squares and semi-squares and other aspects that push and rub against each other and create upsets. We can have upsets with trines, but they're more subtle. Another positive note, we could really see some sacred sexuality be able to come through. And in extension of that, no more male dominance of women. The whole sexual, the Me Too campaign that we've seen come out in the US and abroad since Jupiter went into Scorpio. It's possible for these trines between Jupiter and Neptune to really shift some of that energy. Not guaranteed. Aspects never guarantee anything. They give themes, but anything can be used or abused. So we could also see a lot of manipulation games based upon emotional fears. Trust me when I tell you I know what is best for you. So elites spinning those trust us tales while they manipulate the resources. Give us the big mega tax breaks and it will trickle down to more money in your pocket and you'll get your hourly wage increase. It can also, in its distortions, there will be areas where there will be more of that misogyny and homophobia. And there can be racial tensions, race issues being ruled on an ultimate level by Pisces, because Pisces rules the pigmentation in the skin that makes our skin colors different. So we can see, again, a lot of emotional manipulations as well as emotional breakthroughs. Where is this happening individually in your chart? Where are you wanting to see emotional evolution in your world? How are you wanting to deepen your spiritual understandings so that you're not a victim and feeling powerless? That you can step up into your power and co-create with the universe. Trines are always rewards of prior efforts. So if you're not seeing the rewards, examine your prior efforts. And how do you want to change your effort going forward? Trines are ease of resistance, ease of effort. Jupiter makes waning sesquisquadrates to Chiron. That's moving from full phase to disseminating phase. And again, that disseminating phase is society. And as we are looking at these sesquisquadrates, Pisces and Aries, and so Jupiter and Scorpio, the sexual woundings, potential for sexual healings as social norms, disseminating phase, decide this is no longer acceptable. We're going to have exposure to what is right or wrong, and a changing of what we consider to be those right, wrong standards of conduct. Societal shifts, though, can happen around all kinds of issues, not just the sexuality ones of Jupiter and Scorpio. Can also come about around the whole resources and who controls them. Chiron in Aries. My self-worth is, my self-love is strong enough that I'm going to stand up to be a part of asking for equitable distribution of resources can also include how different groups of people treat each other. Again, whether the differences are racial or gender or political groups or haves and have-nots, there can just be a lot of shifting. Even, disseminating phase is a yin phase, so it's energy moving into the center. But because it is society and how collective groups in society feel, there's an inward reflection as Jupiter goes through that phase with Chiron, and of course then leads up to the one reigning trine that'll happen the end of 2018. The point is there can be a lot of inner reflections. Wait a minute, what happened to that, phrase, love thy neighbor as thyself? Am I doing that? How well can you do that for leaders in your country? Jupiter makes waning semi-squares to Saturn. It moves into that balsamic phase with Saturn. And as we spoke before, it is the karmic review. It is the surrender to source. It is I will, my will, divine will. Jupiter and Saturn are that 20-year cycle that governs the societal structure of growth. Structure Saturn, growth Jupiter, society being the two conscious planet, the two planets that are the boundaries of our consciousness versus the unconscious planets. They had a conjunction in 2000. They will have their next conjunction in 2020. And so throughout the next 3 years to the end of 2020, this balsamic phase, this is just another repeating theme of how things are going to fall apart because they're not working. There will be a theme here around our laws and our legal issues. Jupiter is the philosophy that turns into the Saturnian law. Both of these signs govern law and legal issues. And in balsamic phase, what are the laws that do not reflect the evolving society we live in? Because they're happening, because they're looking at Scorpio and Capricorn, it's also going to one more time bring in the money. And so where are the social support structures that support us with, again, that helping hand up? How do we start to recognize that the quote unquote jobs are not coming back to the US if you live in the US? All the way through 2018, 19, and 2020, you'll see statistic after statistic of huge multinational manufacturing jobs going wherever the labor is cheapest. And the jobs that will come up if you're in the United States are going to be on the nano gig economy side. Here are what Jupiter and Saturn are leading up to, the conjunctions of these planets with Pluto. Saturn makes 1 early 2020, Jupiter makes 3, and then Jupiter, Saturn make 1 late 2020, winter solstice at 0 to 1 degrees Aquarius. This is one of the first of the revolutions that we're going to see coming through. I want you to remember that all the way through 2020, we're going to be having, hold on a second, let me just go back and refer to my notes right here to see how many. We're going to be having Uranus, Pluto biseptile, waxing biseptile, number 5, number 6. In 2021, we'll have the 7th of those 7 biseptiles. So remember that undercurrent that's going to exist between Uranus and Pluto as the two conscious planets go through their conjunctions to Pluto as it comes up. Here's something that I really think is going to become more and more in the news this year, next few years, leading all the way up to their three conjunctions. Remember law, legal issues? The U.S. Constitutional Convention. Article 5 of the Constitution is how we make amendments or changes to the Constitution. Typically, we have to have both the House and the Senate on a federal level support an amendment by 2/3 of the bodies, each of those houses. And if they approve that amendment, it must then be ratified by 3/4 of the states. That's how we created a income tax amendment. That's how we eliminated the amendment that blacks are only 3/5 of a person. So this is how we've created amendments to the Constitution so far, and we've done it 27 times. However, the Constitution also provides for a convention of the states. That requires 2/3 of the states to pass a resolution requesting a convention. We've never done it before. And here we are, transiting Pluto in Capricorn, both Psalmic, the U.S. Pluto, and the first Pluto-Pluto return, a soul return coming in 2022. 27 states have passed a resolution that they want to have a constitutional convention on a single issue, which is the balanced budget amendment. In other words, they want an amendment that would prevent the federal government from going into debt. Don't have a lot of time to cover this issue. I'll cover this in some more detail with the Uranus in Taurus series. But the biggest thing about a sovereign government that creates its own coinage, when you have recessions, the government can go into debt to create jobs to help bring us out of the recession. The distortion of that is a government that prints money, 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 money that doesn't mean anything. That's inflation. When money is linked to goods and resources, it keeps inflation in check. Now, when did we most successfully use the government going into debt? Back in the dirty 30s and the President Roosevelt New Deal, the Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC, you know, 2/3 of the men in the country had no income. So the government put them to debt. How do you think we created all the bridges in this country? How do you think the streams got dammed and all the lakes were created? How do you think, you know, all kinds of infrastructure was created starting in the 1930s, and then of course World War II added on to that in creating producing our way out of the recession. Again, this is an issue that you would want to go study. The conservatives want this balanced budget amendment, and if that would be the case, if you look at it the way it is now, the money's either going to go to the military, which takes half the budget, or it's going to go to social services and entitlements and national parks and clean water and clean air and et cetera, et cetera. This is going to continue more in the news. Thank you, international listeners, for listening to my U.S. perspective. However, states can pass resolutions to create a convention on either a single or multiple issues. So there could be a convention of the states to change the electoral system. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. Al Gore won the popular vote, but the electoral votes went to the opposite candidate. In the case of Al Gore, George Bush, it was decided by a court system that was fishy in its handling of that. In regards to Donald Trump, he won the electoral, but he did not win the popular vote. And there are some who go back and forth on this. I'm one vote, one person. You know, and I come from that small little state where, you know, my vote probably counts, you know, 5 to 10 times as much as the vote of a person in California. So we could change from an electoral college to a direct vote. We could take the ability to coin money away from the Federal Reserve, private corporation owned by private banks, and give it back to the federal government as it was originally in the Constitution. There's many issues. What if we put term limits on Supreme Court justices? What if we put term limits on federal judges? That's where, you know, the Trump administration is really barreling through all these young conservative judges that will decide federal issues for the next 40 years, even if he doesn't make it through office for 2 years. So this is an issue to educate yourself on if you're a U.S. citizen, and choose how you wish to be active. And where is your state at in regards to these 27 states? Is your state willing to be real strict in that they can only have a convention on a single issue? Or can it list multiple issues that they'd like to see shifted? It's possible that there could be some type of compromise on conservative and liberal issues amongst the states that we cannot get out of Congress. Stay tuned. Let's see what the 2018 elections bring us. Venus and Mars retrograde cycles, going to create those relationship reviews during the last half of 2018. Mars is retrograde here, June 26th to August 7th, 9 Aquarius to 28 Capricorn. It is always the most frustrating of the planetary retrogrades. The good news, 62 days. It's only retrograde 2 months versus its typical 2.5 months. It will be in Capricorn 3 months, and another planet in Capricorn, a planet retrograde turning stationary direct on the U.S. Pluto in Capricorn. Mars in Aquarius by the second half of the year for 5 months. Are we going to have that Uranian rebellions during these time periods? Aquarius, the potential for objective considered actions or distorting more of that elitism, class warfare, injustices. Retrogrades back into Capricorn, potential for thoughtful, considered leadership. Capricorn. Distortions, more of what we've been talking about, stealing our money, taking the power away. Here are some active dates for you when Mars goes retrograde, okay? I didn't get that one in order. I needed to move that one down. Here's its retrograde dates. Here's the North Node lunar eclipse that's sandwiched in between 2 solar eclipses. That comes the same day that Mars has its retrograde opposition to the sun. And so you'll have these dates here if you want to look at them. Here is I use the Gemini rising chart, okay, July 4th, 2:13 a.m. Here is the North Node lunar eclipse. This will be when the U.S. is going through a nodal axis return, transiting South Node on South Node, transiting North Node on North Node. This is going to be accurate whether you use the Sibley U.S. chart or you use the Gemini rising. Uranus is still going to be within orb of squaring the natal nodal axis, the transiting nodal axis of the U.S. chart. And oh, by the way, Mercury goes retrograde the day before this North Node lunar eclipse with the Sun-Mars retrograde opposition so active in the US chart, with Uranus in early Taurus squaring everything. You can also see we're going to have Saturn retrograde opposing Venus. It's going to go stationary direct minutes within opposition to Venus. So I think that this end of July chart is the second most active time period in 2018. Now, obviously, this July chart comes before that midterm election chart. Who knows which one's going to be the strongest? They both could be full of lots of changes and upsets. But the other thing happening July 27th, it will be the first of those 5 Uranus biseptiles to Pluto, where we're realigning that evolutionary path between Uranus and Pluto, and what are all those new social evolutionary progressions we're making on collective soul levels. So this is going to be, again, a pretty active time period, that end of July, sandwiched around a North Node lunar eclipse. Donald Trump, that lunar eclipse is also going to be quite active on his chart. That Mercury is going to be turning retrograde just before his Mars. Venus and Neptune are going to be opposing each other in the sky, squaring his own nodes, and that stellium in Gemini Sag. All these transiting planets in Aquarius are going to be opposing Pluto, the soul. So, will he still be in office? Will he have legal actions against him? Will he be impulsive with his actions? Will he be coming up against some soul reckoning for things that he has previously done? Stay tuned. Venus is going to follow the Mars retrograde October 5th through November 16th for 42 days. 11 degrees Scorpio, back to 25 Libra. Relationship reviews. Review. And the reason I say that is we're going to have Jupiter in Libra 2017, Jupiter in Scorpio 2018. Jupiter is causing all of these relationship upsets, lines in the sand, betrayals, lies exposed, relationship beginnings and endings. And Venus is going to come along the latter part of this year and kind of condense it all to a head if the issues have not been addressed by then. Aspect-wise, Venus is going to make 3 waning trines to Mars, 3 waning squares, last quarter squares to Mars. It's going to make 3 oppositions to Uranus and Taurus, and it's going to make 3 squares to the North Node in Leo, South Node in Aquarius. Remember seeing that in the November midterm election chart that I showed you right at the beginning? There's Venus coming along and being active. What do we value in our relationships personally? What do we value in our collective relationships? Wherever you may reside, in whatever country you may be living and participating in. Like I said, Venus is going to review everything brought up by Jupiter over the last couple of years. Potential to evolve into new role equalities, that Libra, Scorpio, exposing the power over, power under, more sexual revolutions, maybe some more equal pay going on, not just between men and women, but maybe that whole 15 minimum wage that's going on in the United States. Will we see more women elected to political offices, midterm elections with this Venus retrograde? Look for where you have individual role equality or the lack of it going on in your world. There could be many places where we're looking for Venus values being more equitable. Venus retrograde back to Libra. Distortions, male power dominance flashbacks, which might cause those more exposures. There could be those who are unwilling to work through the relating issues. Venus retrograde, I'm going to jump in and say goodbye, hello, without working through the issues and setting up karma in both directions, yesterday and tomorrow. Mercury is going to go stationary retrograde the day Venus goes direct. Got that? I got another slide here that I'm going to show you, okay? That's the interior conjunction. I just wanted to show you one more time how Venus retrograde conjunct the Sun, still going to be in that orb of opposing Uranus, squaring the nodes. And again, the waning trines, waning squares to Mars, that'll be going on. Let me back up. Remember, Mars retrograde opposition to the Sun. Mercury's going to go retrograde in Leo. Venus finishes up its retrograde, goes direct. Mercury's going to go retrograde in Sag. So Mercury's going to get tied into both of the Venus retrogrades. Here's the dates of the Mercury retrogrades. And by the way, for those of you who don't know this, whenever Mercury goes retrograde, we do a free webinar like this to just show you what's the details of the mercurial world that is going on and taking place. The thing to recognize is Mercury's going to be retrograde for 6 months of the year, or excuse me, not retrograde. Mercury's going to be in fire signs for half of the year in 2018. So while those slower outer planets, Saturn and Taurus, are going to move into Earth element with Pluto, Neptune's going to be in water. Mercury, half the year in fire signs, Aries, Leo, Sag, going to continue to stir the pot in a lot of ways. So where Mercury, the instigator, the catalyst, the trickster, is concerned, that truth versus lies can still be stirred up. Mercury retrograde in fire signs, yes, it stirs up communications, makes us more argumentative. Listening becomes more challenging. We become quite defensive about our beliefs. Fire is spirit. My God's better than your God. It takes effort to be quiet and listen and be objective when Mercury's retrograde in fire signs. And yet, fire signs, special destiny, it brings potential for creativity to the degree that will quiet down and perhaps maybe listen. When Mercury is retrograde in a fire sign, the opposite sign is air, listening, objectivity. I'm going to take a drink. All right, moving on. I got a few more to go through, but I think I'm going to make it. Winging through pretty fast. Hopefully Leroy's doing okay on the other end with any Q&A. If you participated in my webinars before, you know I bring through a lot of material. Hopefully I'm speaking clearly for you to follow through and understand. And remember, you're going to have the PowerPoint slides afterwards. Nodal axis in Leo Aquarius. You can see it went in May 9th, 2017. It's there till November 6th, 2018. Nodes of the moon. The emotional evolution is always about self-love lessons with North Node in Leo, healing old traumas, South Node in Aquarius. And I gotta burp that water. Potential for new leadership, Leo Aquarius, creative opportunities relative to societal needs, Leo Aquarius. This summer, remember that North Node lunar eclipse, the end of July? Well, all through June, July, the transiting nodal axis will be exact upon the U.S. natal North Node Leo, South Node Aquarius. We're going to have a nodal axis return, which comes once every 19 years. So if you're a citizen of the U.S., live in the U.S., we're going to have a collective emotional renewal. Bring up those issues of equality versus elitism, continued activism, both liberal and conservative populism going on, more of those creative opportunities, or collective trauma and contagions. And while this nodal axis is in Leo and Aquarius, every solar and lunar eclipse activates Donald Trump's chart. So that ego versus objectivity, the hubra, the elitism, or equality. Here's where the solar eclipse is. All right, do you see that? Moon, sunlight coming through. Moon creates a very tiny little spot that has a very tiny little movement around Earth. Solar eclipses happen in narrow bands upon planet Earth. We all saw the solar eclipse in the US, or part of it if you live in the US. Lunar eclipses, the Earth's in between the sun and the moon. Sunlight coming through, but the Earth is large enough to block the moon either partially or totally. Here's our south node eclipses. This means the sun on the south node Aquarius. We have a total lunar eclipse at 11:12 Aquarius Leo, January 31st. We have a partial solar, February 15th at 27 Aquarius. I started looking at these, and again, every single one activates Donald Trump's chart. I'm not making any predictions here, but these are the eclipses that we are going to be looking at over the next month on Trump's chart. The lunar eclipse is going to be happening within a degree of his Pluto. And we're also going to have the nodes of the moon within orb of his Pluto as well. He can feel emotionally betrayed and undermined, an inability to recognize his own prior actions. He can go into that 12th house Pluto, deny and project. 2 weeks later, we have a solar eclipse on the south node. Again, sun, south node, sun, south node, solar eclipse season. If we look at the solar eclipse here, it's going to be opposed his Mars, and it's going to be receiving a square from Jupiter in Scorpio. So this solar eclipse opposing his Mars, anger-based actions. These eclipse in his 6th house, feeling victimized. Could we see secretive financial actions revealed with the squares from Scorpio? They're not revealed. We're sure been talking about it in the news today. Probably not going to go away for a while. Then, come this summer, we're going to have that North Node eclipse season. And as I said, a solar, a lunar, and a solar. Partial solar, July 12th at 21 Cancer. That North Node lunar eclipse that I told you about at 5 Leo Aquarius, the chart I showed you the end of July, remember? the Sun-Mars opposition, the first of the Uranus biseptiles to Pluto, and Mercury going retrograde July 26th, and then followed by a partial solar eclipse August 11th at about 19 Leo. Here are those eclipses on Donald Trump's chart again. Here's the solar eclipse on July 12th. As you can see, the nodes are still on his natal Pluto, but the Mars retrograde is opposing his Pluto, still squared by Jupiter in Scorpio. This solar eclipse at 21 degrees Cancer is going to be smack dab on his natal Saturn. Emotional and familial upsets and traumas, legal indictments, financial revelations and upsets, possibilities. Again, that Jupiter square with Mars retrograde on his Pluto is not going to let up financially. All of the familial stuff that could go on with this. I made all these slides a couple of days ago before today's headlines, if any of you are watching the headlines on this new book coming out, Fire and Fury, and somebody writing about all these interviews with Trump employees. And of course, Steve Bannon, making some of the loudest noise on that. Steve Bannon being an extreme alt-right, what is he, the editor of Breitbart News, the alt-right publication, and was in Trump's campaign at the end and also in his White House for a while. Here's the last solar eclipse, August 11th. Here, we're going to have that eclipse at about 19 degrees Leo. It's going to be kind of sandwiched smack dab in between his Mars, Pluto in Leo. Mercury retrograde again, remember, conjunct his Pluto. The nodes, transiting nodes, are still activating his Pluto. Mars is getting ready to go stationary direct, and one more time back over opposing his Pluto. And Jupiter stays in a square. So again, hidden information revealed, financial struggles or upsets. All 5 eclipses are active on Donald Trump's chart in 2018. You can take it from there however you want to. I wanted to point this out. It's not that I haven't seen it before, but it was like it was hitting me in the last few days. I did the July 4th chart as a bi-wheel around Donald Trump's chart using June 14th, 46th, the 10:54 a.m. Queens, New York. The U.S. has Neptune at 22 Virgo, and it squares this Gemini Sag opposition in Donald Trump's chart. It squares the nodes, it squares the sun, moon, full moon. Donald Trump was born on a lunar eclipse, so all eclipses affect him whether they do in the sky or not, just eclipse in general. Lunar eclipses in general affect him because he was born on one. But I thought he really is confused with why we don't idolize him, Neptune and Virgo. And Neptune and Virgo, there is a part of us that either believe everything he says as absolute gospel or as an outright lie, and he couldn't tell the truth if his life depended upon it. This U.S. Neptune square his Gemini Sag, those are those extremes that he's literally pulling us in our beliefs as a country. Will this change? The U.S. has its Mars right up here on this north node. Again, the splits. Will this change as time goes by? But what I picked up on is Donald Trump's confusion about why we don't see him as 12th house Pluto. He sees himself. And he may not be in touch with this reality. He may have some big reality wake-up calls coming this year. I wanted to just briefly talk about the planetary nodes. So not just the moon has nodes, ascending, descending, the ecliptic, north node, future, north node, past of the planetary energy. All the planets have nodes. But the outer planets, and this is anything beyond the moon, this is Mercury out through Pluto and Eris. The outer planets are so far from Earth that their nodes are not opposite, and they range widely in degrees throughout a calendar year. So you always need that actual ephemerist. And the software program that's most popular is SolarFire. And here's how to look up the nodes if you want to get a listing of where the south node and north node of any planet is. However, the south nodes of Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto are all in Capricorn. And I had pulled 2020 out because that's when they have their conjunctions, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus conjunct each other. Here's where the transiting south node of Jupiter in Capricorn is throughout the year 2020. 9 to 22 Capricorn, Saturn 21 to 30 Capricorn, Pluto 20 to 22 Capricorn. Here's where the north nodes of these three planets are in Cancer in 2020. Jupiter 30 Gemini to 13 Cancer, Saturn 17 to 27 Cancer, Pluto 19 to 21 Cancer. For those of you following astrology, where has Pluto and Capricorn been transiting? 17 to 19 and a half degrees in Capricorn in 2017. 2018, Pluto is 19 to 21 degrees Capricorn. So the opposites in Cancer. Transiting Pluto in Capricorn has been going over its south node in Capricorn. And it'll continue to have probably buku conjunctions, okay? And maybe only 3 with the retrograde. It depends on how those nodes move. I haven't researched that one yet. And the Pluto polarity point is going to be going over its north node in Cancer as well. Where's Pluto in 2018? Between 19 and 21 degrees. So here's Pluto on its own nodes. South nodes in Capricorn. It means that there's been human soul participation in the shift from natural law, or what we would call matriarchal principles, to patriarchal distortions. And the Jeffrey Wolf Green teachings feel that most of this happened in the sub-age of Capricorn during the age of Cancer. So there was a real shift from about 6500 to 7500 BC, or backwards, 7500 to 6500 BC. Age of Cancer, halfway through, sub-age of Capricorn, really started shifting from that equality of matriarchal, patriarchal principles into that distortion that then got codified into the Old Testament during the age of Aries. So as Pluto is making this transit, as Saturn does it in 2019, Jupiter 2020, it's time to review all this. The North Node in Cancer means there's that potential to honor and nurture both genders equally, as well as honor planet Earth and all species equally. And the potential is to activate this when these planets transit in Cancer. Now, obviously, Pluto and Capricorn, every 250 years, we've had multiple chances to change this. But this is one of those Pluto and Capricorn transits at the ending of the Piscean age. And when we have that shift of the ages, that shakes things up. So we're going to break out of all of these patriarchal distortions and move into equality in the age of Aquarius. That's why I think there's some exciting times going on right now. So again, 2017, Pluto in Capricorn is going to be strongest going over its own nodes. 2019, Saturn will be strongest over Pluto's nodes. 2020, Jupiter over Pluto's nodes. Now that's not looking up Saturn over its own nodes or Jupiter over its own nodes. There's also the fact that every time Pluto transits Capricorn, we don't have Saturn and Jupiter right there as well. So that triple conjunction, it is leading up to something. And this is the quickening in 2018, especially for those of us who recognize astrological trends and exercise that free will to actually do something about it. And just in case you're wondering, on July 4th, 1776, the Gemini rising chart, South node of Pluto was 17.5 Capricorn, Saturn 23 Capricorn, and Jupiter 7 Capricorn. North node of Jupiter was 9 Cancer, North node of Saturn 21 Cancer, North node of Pluto 17 Cancer. The natal nodes of the U.S. Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto are also in Cancer, Capricorn. Do you know how many hit lists you could create just looking at when these planets are transiting these dates? You could take just these 6 dates of these 3 planets. And when did Pluto go over them? When is Pluto going over them? When will Saturn go over them as it now moves into Capricorn, conjunct oppose? When will Jupiter do it in 2020 when it's in Capricorn? So if you look at the natal north node of Pluto, 17 Cancer, south node 17 Cap, Pluto went over those nodes 3 times in 2017. Now that we've had a year of Donald Trump's presidency, can you start to get a little reflection beyond all the shock and disassociation and trauma that you were having a year ago? Can we see some of the larger picture to this whole resistance movement? This year of activism and this year of what we want to really ground into moving forward. Here's the US chart with the ingress chart, January 1st upon it. Saturn's going to be quite active. We're still feeling Uranus's waning squares to Mercury. We're still feeling Uranus's waxing squares to Pluto. It still has to do the 3rd one yet in 2018 to Pluto. Then again, well, the transiting biseptals, I'm going to say it's going to be a few years before transiting Uranus makes a biseptal to Pluto. Might be doing that during the Pluto returns. No, they're going to be finish up in 21, Pluto return 22. It'll be beyond that. Saturn is going to go stationary retrograde at 9 Capricorn, opposing the U.S. Sun. It's going to go direct September 6th at 2.5 Cap, just shy of directly opposing the U.S. Venus at 2:20 Cancer. So Saturn's transit through Capricorn here is going to bring some objectivity in the Gemini rising chart around this whole inclusive versus exclusive Cancer Capricorn, the nationalism, the racism, the protectionism. If by the Gemini chart you see transiting Saturn here in the 8th house with the 2nd house Cancer planets, going to intensify all the resource issues going on. And of course, Saturn is going to come along here and make the square to itself. I think it's going to do it the next retrograde cycle in 2019. It might get there the tail end of 2018. But this year, Saturn, again, opposed Venus. It will make 3 oppositions to this Jupiter at 6 Cancer. More opportunities for financial upsets, sexuality upsets, political upsets. The powers that be may or may not be able to get by with the tax laws that they passed. And of course, then towards the end of the year, the one opposition. And if you look at this is chart January 1st. Every January 1st, the sun in Capricorn is opposing the U.S. Cancer. We always have objectivity for reflection and, feedback from a broader perspective around the New Year's time period. Just because the sun is transiting, just because transiting sun is always opposing the natal. Pluto's still an orb to this natal one as well, but it's also moving closer and closer to opposing Mercury, which it will do in 21 before the conjunctions in 22. So I just thought I'd point those tidbits out to you. Now, I'm not going to go into these. Saturn in Capricorn is going to be more active than just the oppositions I showed you all the way. The U.S. has 7 of its 11 planetary, I could include Chiron, has 7 of the 11 planetary archetypes in cardinal signs. So when a transiting or forecasting planet is in a cardinal sign, it really activates the U.S. chart. Here's Saturn all the way through 18, 19, 20 while it's in Capricorn. Here's Jupiter just this year while it is in Scorpio throughout 2018. And then here's a more extended list of all the aspects Jupiter makes to the U.S. chart while it's in Scorpio. And this one includes minor aspects that earlier chart didn't. And of course, Uranus, as I said before, it's finishing up one more waxing square to the U.S. chart. Inclusive versus exclusive. I've seen how that has been such a battleground with communications and fake news and truth versus lies, etc. That's been going on. The threats to the country from, all of the hacking and computer stuff. Neptune is finishing up one semi-square, waxing semi-square to Pluto. And so it's right in there with the Uranus aspects and this whole nationalism, protectionism, inclusive versus exclusive, truth, confusion around to the media and who to believe, the potential of Neptune to the U.S. natal Pluto here is evolving into new beliefs around a national self-identity as we've been exposed to so much that has shocked us, including how the leader of our country has shocked us. So, not going into a lot of detail on those, what is important to recognize from all of that is Jupiter and Saturn are quite active to the U.S. July 4th chart. So on a social conscious level, Jupiter, Saturn, they're continuing to be part of this big picture that is going on in the sky and specifically to citizens of the United States. One more time, we're not done with this. The active many can always overcome the ruthless few when we stand together, when we organize together. And here is my pet, my soapbox. I was going to say my pet. That's a green piggy bank. And so the Public Banking Institute is calling 2018 the year of the public bank. Jupiter and Scorpio? Again, choose how you're going to be active. So here is that coupon code we're done with that Saturn and Capricorn series. And this is an ad that we decided to run in the Mountain Astrologer to just see what the feedback would be. But we thought we'd give our listeners a chance. You can save 30%, 10 hours worth of materials. You would apply the coupon code Saturn. Here's my future Mercury retrogrades. Here's Mars. I haven't quite decided on my dates. Again, I'm going to do an 8-part series, Chiron and Aries, all 12 house transit. Same thing, Uranus and Taurus transiting through all 12 of the houses, 8-part series. And I will be starting them probably within the next 4 to 6 weeks. And I will most likely go back to back with these 2 series. This is the last slide. I did it. I hope you're not too overwhelmed. Again, you're going to have these PowerPoint slides that you can refer to. And so keep in mind, 7, Uranus, biseptiles to Pluto, realigning all the new forms that we're on a path to create in first quarter phase. And these biseptiles are collective for every citizen on planet Earth, no matter what country. 5, Uranus waxing semi-sextiles to Neptune. Really working to create, new beginnings as we evolve on collective social levels with these changing technologies for every citizen on planet Earth, no matter what country you live in. This is the big backdrop that all these other cycles that I showed you are taking place upon. Questions, comments, Leroy?
I just wanted to add a little Saturn and Capricorn note. I did split out those houses 1 through 4, 5 through 8, 9 through 12 as separate products in the forecasting webinars page. You can save 30% off each of those or buy the entire series as well as the Saturn archetypes and cycles series. So you don't have to buy the whole series if you choose not to, but you're saving 30%. So use that coupon code Saturn. And I don't think the codes are case sensitive, but just enter lowercase SATURN for your best results.
All right. Any comments or questions?
Nope, everybody was very well behaved on the board. I think we got through very well, and it kind of felt like an astro encyclopedia from my perspective. Lots of information. I sure am glad we provide 66 slides that people can kind of print out if they want to keep track of some of these transits, because there was a ton of data.
Well, in addition to this eclipse season, just remember the eclipse season, the end of July, and the midterm elections. Those are going to be the 2 most active times of the year, even if you are not residing in the United States.
And remember to look for the PDF. There's a link to the PDF in the follow-up email coming in 24 hours from GoToWebinar service. Everybody here is registered, so they should get that follow-up email. Just make sure you check for it in 24 hours. It'll have a link, an independent link to the PDF, and all those audio and video links will be on the first page of the PDF with 66 slides adjoining. So thanks for enjoying our content.
All right, everyone, thank you. I hope this has been able to fill you with some sense of hope in how we can make change and evolving on planet Earth in 2018. And wishing you all the best with your own prosperity and relationship to yourself, relationship to others, and your relationship with resources on planet Earth. Natural law is abundant. All right, everyone, have a great year, and I'll see you on our future webinar in 2018.